Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the True Scary Stories compilation. Story 1. The Sleepwalker's Secret. I had always found solace in the rhythmic sound of my wife's breathing as she slept. But recently, the night had become a stage for something far more sinister. Her breaths turned to murmurs, and her murmurs to a name, the Collector. Each night, she would rise from our bed and wander the house like a specter, her eyes glassy and unseeing. I followed her one evening, my heart pounding in the silence, only to find her standing before our family portrait. Her fingers were clawing at my painted face, her nails leaving jagged lines across my visage. The next morning, I confronted her about it. She had no memory of the event, no recollection of her nightly excursions. It was as if she became someone else entirely when the moon claimed the sky. I decided to delve deeper into this mystery, to understand who the Collector was. My research led me to old town records, to a tale of a man who was said to collect souls, trapping them in portraits and feeding off their essences. As the days passed, my wife's condition worsened. She began to speak in tongues, her voice a cacophony of whispers that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. I watched her, helpless, as she tore at the portrait with a fervor that chilled me to the bone. It was then I noticed something peculiar. The portrait seemed to change. My image was fading, growing more indistinct with each passing night. Desperate for answers, I visited a local medium, a woman known for her ability to commune with the other side. She spoke of a presence in our home, a malevolent force that was tethered to the portrait. She warned me that the Collector was close, that he had marked me for his next prize. I left her place with a heavy heart and a talisman she claimed would protect me. That night, the air was thick with the scent of impending rain. I clutched the talisman, watching as my wife once again approached the portrait. But this time, she stopped short, her gaze fixated on something behind me. I turned, and for a fleeting moment, I saw him, the Collector. His eyes were hollow pits, his smile a gash across his face. He reached for me, and the world went black. I awoke to the sound of thunder, my body drenched in sweat. The portrait was whole again, my face untouched. But the talisman lay shattered on the floor, and my wife, she was sleeping soundly. The days blurred into nights, and the Collector's presence grew stronger. I became obsessed with the portrait, studying its every detail. The brush strokes that formed my face seemed to writhe, as if they were alive. My wife's sleepwalking episodes escalated, her whispers now filled with urgency. She spoke of a pact, a bargain she had made with the Collector. In exchange for her soul, he promised her something she desired above all else. I confronted her again, desperate for answers. She looked at me with eyes that held no recognition, her voice hollow. "He promised me a way out," she said. "A way to escape this life, this mundane existence." I shook her, demanding to know what she meant. But she only repeated the same phrase, her fingers tracing the edges of the portrait. I turned to the medium once more, seeking guidance. She revealed the truth. The Collector was a soul-hungry entity, feeding off the life force of those he ensnared. He had chosen my wife, seducing her with promises of freedom. But there was a catch. The Collector would claim her soul, and in return, she would become his vessel. Her body would be a conduit for his malevolence, a gateway to our world. I had to break the pact, sever the ties that bound my wife to the Collector. Armed with knowledge, I delved into forbidden rituals, desperate to find a way to save her. The medium warned me, the Collector was cunning, and he would not release his grip easily. I needed an offering, something of equal value to my wife's soul. The storm raged outside as I stood before the portrait, my heart pounding. I whispered the incantation, my voice lost in the wind. The Collector appeared, his form shifting from shadow to substance. His eyes bore into mine, and I offered him my own soul. But he laughed, a sound that echoed through the house. "Too late," he said. "Your wife is already mine." The house became a battleground, the air thick with tension. My wife lay in our bed, her body frail and feverish. The Collector's mark had left its imprint on her. Her eyes now held a distant knowledge, a connection to something beyond our world. I kept vigil, my mind racing with desperate plans. The medium returned, her eyes grave. "The collector is not done," she said. "He seeks more than just your wife's soul. He wants a vessel, a conduit to walk among us." She handed me a vial of liquid silver. "This is your last chance," she whispered. "The elixir of release. Use it wisely." I crept into the room where the portrait hung, its surface pulsating with malevolence. The collector awaited me, his form shifting from shadow to flesh. "You cannot save her," he hissed. "She is mine." But I had made my choice. I uncorked the vial and flung the liquid at the canvas. The portrait screamed, its colors bleeding into the air. My wife convulsed, her body racked with pain. The collector's grip tightened, and I saw his true form, a twisted amalgamation of souls, their faces etched in agony. "You fool," he spat. "You think you can defy me?" But I pressed on, my fingers tracing the edges of the portrait. The elixir seeped into the canvas, unraveling the collector's hold. The room trembled, reality warping. The collector's laughter echoed, a chorus of tormented voices. My wife's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw her, the woman I loved, trapped within the darkness. "Finish it," she whispered. "End this." I tore at the portrait, my nails digging into the fabric. The collector wailed, his form disintegrating. But he had one last trick. He lunged at me, his essence merging with mine. Pain seared through my veins, memories flooding my mind. I saw his victims, their faces etched in agony. And then, clarity, the collector's weakness. I whispered the forgotten name, the one he had hidden deep within my subconscious. The room fractured, reality splintering. The collector screamed, his form unraveling. And then, silence. The portrait lay empty, my wife crumpled on the floor. Her eyes held recognition, gratitude. "Thank you," she mouthed. But the collector was not defeated. His essence clung to mine, a parasite feeding off my life force. I knew what I had to do. I kissed my wife one last time, whispered my love, and stepped into the portrait. The canvas closed behind me, and I found myself in a realm of shadows. The collector awaited, his eyes hungry. And so, I became the next vessel, the next collector of souls. My wife's face faded from my memory, replaced by a hunger that consumed me. I wander now, seeking those who sleepwalk through life, whispering their names into the darkness. The portrait hangs in a forgotten corner, waiting for its next victim. The storm rages outside, and I hear the whispers, a promise of return. The collector is patient. He knows I will tire, that I will seek release. But until then, I am bound to this cursed canvas, my life a forever wander. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. Echoes of the Void. I had always been the rational one, the skeptic. Ghost stories and supernatural tales were nothing more than fabrications of an overactive imagination to me. That was until the day I received a text from Jason, my brother who had been dead for over a year. The message was simple yet chilling: "I'm still here." My heart raced as I stared at the screen, the words blurring as a cold shiver ran down my spine. I mustered the courage to call the number, but it went straight to voicemail. Jason's voice in the recording was a haunting reminder of what I had lost. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and obsessive research. I scoured the internet for explanations, delved into forums of the paranormal, and even consulted a medium. They all said the same thing: the veil between our world and the next was thinner than we thought. But I needed proof, something tangible. That's when I decided to visit Jason's grave. The cemetery was a somber field of stone and silence. Jason's headstone stood unassuming among the others, its inscription a testament to a life cut short. I stood there, phone in hand, half expecting another message. Instead, the silence was broken by a faint whisper carried by the wind, a whisper that sounded eerily like Jason's voice. I spun around, searching for the source, but found nothing except the creeping fog that began to envelop the graveyard. As night fell, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from all around me, yet nowhere at all. I felt a presence, something unseen, watching me. Panic set in, and I fled the cemetery, the whispers chasing me like echoes of the void. Back home, the safety of my four walls did little to calm my frayed nerves. The text message glowed ominously on my phone screen, a digital specter that refused to be ignored. The following evening, as the shadows grew long and the world outside my window turned to shades of twilight, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jason's number: "Meet me at our place." Our place, the old treehouse in the woods where we spent countless summers as kids. It was a sanctuary, a haven of memories. Now, it beckoned me into the darkness. With trepidation, I ventured into the woods, the moon casting long, sinister shadows through the gnarled branches. The treehouse loomed ahead, its wooden planks creaking in the wind. As I climbed the ladder, each rung groaned under my weight, as if protesting my intrusion. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and abandonment. And there, in the corner, was Jason's old walkie-talkie, crackling to life with static. A voice cut through the white noise, a voice that sent chills down my spine. "Why did you leave me?" it asked. It was Jason's voice, full of pain and accusation. I stumbled backward, the walkie-talkie falling from my trembling hands. The room spun, and I could feel the darkness closing in, a darkness that was alive with my brother's anguish. The treehouse seemed to hold its breath as I stood there, the walkie-talkie's static echoing in my ears. Jason's voice, distorted and otherworldly, continued to emanate from the device. "Why did you leave me?" he repeated, each syllable dripping with sorrow. My mind raced, grappling with the impossible. How could my brother be speaking to me from beyond the grave? I clung to the edge of the wooden table, my knuckles white. "Jason," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Is it really you?" The air thickened, suffocating, as if the room itself was alive. The walkie-talkie crackled, and then his voice changed, clearer, more urgent. "The darkness took me," he said. "But I'm still here, trapped between worlds. You have to help me." My rational mind screamed that this was madness, a hallucination born of grief. Yet, the desperation in Jason's voice was too real. "How?" I asked, my breath hitching. "What do I need to do?" The walkie-talkie remained silent for a moment, and then the static returned, punctuated by disjointed words. "The old well," Jason said. "The one in the clearing. That's where it began. Find the truth, and set me free." The clearing. I knew the place, a forgotten corner of the woods, overgrown with tangled vines and memories. Jason and I used to play there as kids, inventing fantastical adventures. But now, it held a secret, a darkness that had swallowed my brother whole. I descended the ladder, my legs shaky, and stepped out into the moonlit night. The forest whispered secrets, leaves rustling like ancient pages. The well stood at the center of the clearing, its stone walls crumbling. Moonlight filtered through the gaps, revealing the murky water below. I peered into its depths, half expecting to see Jason's face staring back at me. But there was nothing, just darkness, an abyss that seemed to swallow sound itself. I reached for the bucket, its rusted chain creaking as I lowered it. The water was cold, biting, and as I drew it up, I noticed something, faint letters etched into the well's rim. The words were barely legible, but they sent a chill down my spine. "Sacrifice," I read aloud. "To bridge the gap." Sacrifice? What did it mean? I glanced back at the treehouse, the walkie-talkie still lying there, its static-filled voice haunting me. Jason's plea echoed in my mind. "Find the truth," he had said. But what truth? And what sacrifice was required? As the night wore on, I delved deeper into the well's history. Local legends spoke of a cursed love, a forbidden union that had ended tragically. The well, they said, was the site of that doomed romance. Desperate lovers had thrown themselves into its depths, hoping to reunite in death. But their souls remained trapped, unable to move on. Was Jason one of them? Had he stumbled upon this tragic secret? I returned to the well, armed with a spade and determination. The earth yielded reluctantly, revealing bones, human bones. I gasped, my mind reeling. Jason's bones? Had he been here all along? But then I noticed something else, a pendant, tarnished but unmistakable. It was the necklace he used to wear, a gift from our mother. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched it, realizing the truth. Jason had sacrificed himself to bridge the gap between worlds, hoping to find answers. And now, he was calling out to me, urging me to complete the ritual. The well awaited its final offering. But what would it cost me? As I stood there, torn between love and fear, the whispers returned, louder this time. Set me free, Jason's voice pleaded. Or join me in the void. The well's gaping maw seemed to mock me as I stood there, the pendant clutched tightly in my hand. Jason's voice echoed in my mind, urging me to complete the ritual. But what would it cost me? The legend spoke of sacrifice, but what kind? I had to know, for Jason's sake and my own. I returned to the treehouse, the walkie-talkie still lying where I left it. Its static-filled voice whispered secrets that had been buried for centuries. The well was a gateway, a bridge between worlds, but it demanded payment. I sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, the pendant resting on my palm. What do you want? I asked, my voice trembling. What sacrifice will set my brother free? The whispers intensified, a chorus of lost souls. Blood, they murmured. Life for life. My heart pounded. Blood? It was madness. Yet, I knew what I had to do. The well had claimed Jason, and now it hungered for another soul. I glanced at the walkie-talkie, its buttons worn from years of use. Jason's voice had become my lifeline, my connection to the other side. But how far would I go to keep it? The moon hung low in the sky as I stepped back into the clearing. The well awaited its offering. I pricked my finger with the spade, the pain sharp and real. Blood dripped into the water, mingling with the memories of those who had come before. The whispers grew louder, urging me on. More, they hissed. More. I hesitated, my mind a battlefield of fear and determination. Jason's face flashed before me, his laughter, his tears, the way he used to sneak into my room at night to share secrets. He was my brother, my flesh and blood. But he was also trapped, a prisoner of the void. I pressed my hand against the well's rim, willing myself to go deeper. Take me, I whispered. Take me instead. The water surged, pulling me in. Darkness enveloped me, and I felt weightless, suspended between worlds. Faces swirled around me, lovers, children, soldiers, all seeking release. And then, I saw Jason. His eyes held both gratitude and sorrow. Thank you, he said. But there's one more thing. What? I gasped, my voice barely audible. What more could you want? Jason's smile was bittersweet. The truth, he said. The truth about us, about our family. His words cut through the fog of confusion. Our family had always been secretive, their past shrouded in half-truths and whispers. What had they hidden from us? What had driven Jason to the well? The void tightened its grip, threatening to pull me under. Tell me, I pleaded. Tell me everything. Jason's voice echoed, merging with the others. Our ancestors made a pact, he said. A pact with the darkness. They sought power, immortality. But it came at a price, a sacrifice every generation. Our parents paid that price, and now it's our turn. My mind reeled. Sacrifice? Our parents? I had to know more. How? I asked. How do we break the cycle? Jason's eyes bore into mine. The well, he said. It's the key. You must destroy it, sever the connection. Only then can we be free. The void tugged harder, threatening to tear me apart. Promise me, Jason whispered. Promise you'll end it. I nodded, my resolve firm. I promise. And with that, the darkness swallowed me whole. Now, as I stand at the edge of the clearing, spade in hand, I know what I must do. The well awaits, hungry for its final offering. Jason's voice lingers, urging me forward. The truth lies buried in its depths, and I am ready to unearth it, even if it costs me everything. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 3. The Unseen Hours. I always believed our house had secrets. But nothing had prepared me for the chilling discovery I made one languid summer evening. As I rummaged through the attic, a glint of black caught my eye. Tucked behind old family albums, I found an ancient video camera, its surface cold and dusty. Curiosity piqued, I wiped the lens and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, revealing footage of my family sleeping. The camera panned across their peaceful faces, lingering on the rise and fall of their chests. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized the video was time-stamped last night. But that was impossible. I was home alone. The camera had captured more than just slumber, it had recorded something sinister lurking in the shadows. A figure, barely discernible, stood at the foot of each bed, watching, waiting. Its presence was an unnatural void, a distortion in the air that made my heart race. I paused the video, my hands trembling. The house was silent, save for the soft hum of the camera. I replayed the footage, searching for clues, but found none. The figure remained an enigma, its motives obscured by the grainy resolution. As night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The camera had become a portal to a nightmare, and I was the unwilling voyeur. I locked it away, hoping to forget, but sleep eluded me. Every creak and whisper of the house was a reminder of the unseen observer. The next morning, I scoured the house for signs of intrusion. Every window was secure, every door locked. Yet, the unease clung to me like a second skin. I decided to set up the camera, to catch the watcher in the act. But as darkness approached, I questioned my resolve. Was I ready to face the truth of what lurked in the shadows? The day dragged on, each second stretching into eternity as I awaited nightfall. The camera sat ominously on the mantelpiece, its lens staring blankly into the room. I busied myself with mundane tasks, trying to keep the dread at bay. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, my resolve wavered. I activated the camera before retreating to my room, the red recording light a baleful eye in the gathering gloom. I lay in bed, feigning sleep, my ears straining for any sound out of place. Hours passed, and just as I began to hope it was all a figment of my imagination, a faint whisper broke the silence. The voice was indistinct, a susurration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I held my breath, listening intently. The whispers grew louder, forming words I couldn't understand. They were coaxing, insidious, worming their way into my mind. I forced myself out of bed, compelled to confront the source. The house was dark, the only light emanating from the camera's display. The whispers guided me, leading me down the hallway to my parents' room. The door creaked open, revealing the empty bed bathed in moonlight. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. I approached the camera, heart pounding, and played back the recording. The footage showed me asleep, then rising and walking to my parents' room. But there was no sign of the whisperer. Confusion and fear mingled within me. Was I going mad? Or was there truly something in our home, something that defied explanation? I decided to delve deeper into the camera's contents, hoping to find answers. What I discovered was a series of videos, each more disturbing than the last. The final video ended with a chilling revelation. The whisperer was not just an observer, it was a harbinger. And as the camera zoomed in on a shadowy corner of the room, I realized with horror that the whisperer had always been there, waiting for its moment to emerge. The night was oppressive, a thick blanket of darkness that seemed to suffocate the very air. I sat huddled in front of the camera, its screen casting an eerie glow on my face. The videos I had found were a chronicle of terror, each one revealing more of the whisperer's insidious nature. I watched, transfixed, as the final video played. It showed my family, unaware of the malevolent force that had invaded our home. The whisperer's shadow loomed over them, a dark specter of malice. And then, it turned its attention to me. The camera zoomed in, and I saw it, the whisperer's true form. It was a distortion of reality, a creature of nightmares. Its eyes were hollow pits of despair, its mouth a gaping maw of darkness. It whispered promises of oblivion, its voice a cacophony of every fear I'd ever known. I realized then that it fed on terror, growing stronger with each panicked breath. The video ended abruptly, and I was left in silence. I knew I had to act, to protect my family from this entity. I scoured the house for any sign of the whisper, but it was as if it had vanished into thin air. Yet, the feeling of being watched never left me. As dawn approached, I made a decision. I would use the camera to lure the whisperer out. I set it up in my room, the red light blinking steadily. I lay down, pretending to sleep, the camera my silent sentinel. Hours passed, and just as the first light of day crept through the curtains, I heard it, the whisper. It was closer now, more insistent. I opened my eyes and saw the whisper, its form flickering like a faulty signal. It reached out, its hand a blur of static. I lunged for the camera, turning it to face the whisperer. The creature recoiled as if struck, its form dissolving on the screen. I held my breath, hoping against hope that I had banished it. But then, the whisperer's voice filled the room, a single, chilling sentence that froze my blood. "You cannot escape the unseen hours." The camera died, its screen going black. I was plunged into darkness, the whisperer's words echoing in my mind. I knew then that the battle was far from over. The whisperer was part of our home now, a shadow that would always linger. Story 4. The echoes of hollow laughter. Every night, as the clock chimes midnight, a chilling symphony begins next door. The abandoned house, with its boarded-up windows and overgrown garden, becomes a playground for invisible children. Their laughter, a haunting melody, seeps through the cracks in the walls, filling my room with echoes of a life that once was. I moved into this neighborhood seeking solace after a tumultuous past. The house was a bargain, they said, because of the stories. I never believed in ghost tales, but now, each night, the laughter tests my skepticism. It's a sound that shouldn't exist, yet it's as real as the fear crawling under my skin. Tonight, I muster the courage to confront the source. As I approach the derelict house, the laughter grows louder, more tangible. I press my face against the cold glass of the window, peering into the darkness. Silence greets me, a stark contrast to the cacophony just moments before. The air inside feels charged, heavy with whispers that dance just beyond hearing. I wander through the rooms, each step stirring up dust and memories. The walls are lined with faded wallpaper, peeling away to reveal older, darker stains beneath. In the parlor, a grand piano sits, its keys yellowed with age. A compulsion takes over, and I press a key. The note hangs in the air, a somber invitation. That's when I hear it, a giggle, soft and sinister, coming from the shadows. I spin around, searching for the source, but find nothing. The laughter builds again, surrounding me, mocking my fear. It's then I realize the truth, the children aren't in the house. They are the house. And they're not inviting me to play, they're inviting me in, forever. As the realization dawns, the floorboards creak behind me. I turn, and for a fleeting moment, I see them, translucent figures, eyes hollow, mouths agape in silent laughter. Then, the world goes black. The darkness is absolute, a void where even the concept of light seems a distant memory. My heart races, each beat a drum echoing in the emptiness. Panic grips me, but a whisper in the depths of my mind urges calm. I'm not alone. A faint glow begins to materialize, revealing the outlines of the parlor. The children, mere wraiths in the gloom, circle around me. Their features are blurred, but their intentions are clear. They beckon me to join their endless game. I resist, trying to back away, but the room stretches, distorting reality. The children's laughter grows louder, a cacophony that threatens to shatter my sanity. I cover my ears, but the sound is inside my head, a relentless tide. "Who are you?" I shout into the darkness. The laughter stops abruptly, replaced by a multitude of whispers. "We are the forgotten," they say, "the ones who played too long." Memories flood through me, not my own. I see the house in its heyday, filled with joy and life. Then tragedy, a fire that consumed everything. The children were trapped, their laughter turning to screams that went unheard. I understand now. They're trapped in a limbo, their spirits bound to the house, repeating their last moments in an eternal loop. They're not malicious, they're lost, yearning for release. A plan forms in my mind. If I can recreate the scene, acknowledge their presence, maybe they'll find peace. I need to act quickly. The air grows colder, the shadows darker. It's as if the house itself is fighting back, unwilling to let go of its inhabitants. I start to arrange the room, mimicking the memories I saw. The piano plays a somber tune, the soundtrack to a final act. As I work, the children watch, their whispers growing hopeful. The room is set, a perfect replica of that fateful day. I hold my breath and wait. The children gather close, their forms gaining clarity. They smile, and for a moment, they're just kids, innocent and full of life. Then, a scream pierces the night, not from the children, but from somewhere deeper in the house. It's a new sound, one filled with pain and anger. The children's expressions turn to terror. They fade away, leaving me alone with the scream that grows louder, closer. The scream that tore through the silence was not of this world. It resonated with a pain so profound, so visceral, that it threatened to consume everything in its path. I stood frozen, my heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic prisoner seeking escape. The house seemed to breathe with a life of its own, the walls pulsating with the force of the scream. I could feel it in my bones, a vibration that spoke of ancient agonies and secrets buried deep within the foundation of this cursed place. I had to find the source. Driven by a mix of fear and determination, I moved deeper into the house, each step taking me further from the realm of the living and closer to the heart of darkness that lay at its core. The hallway stretched before me, lined with portraits of people whose eyes followed my every move. Their gazes were filled with sorrow, and I realized they too were part of this tragic tapestry, their souls woven into the very fabric of the building. The scream led me to a door, different from the others. It was older, heavier, with carvings that depicted scenes of joy turning to horror. I reached out, my hand trembling, and pushed it open. Inside was a room untouched by time. Toys lay scattered on the floor, a dollhouse sat in the corner, and a rocking horse gently moved back and forth as if just vacated. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and something else, something sinister. I heard it again, the scream, but now it was accompanied by a voice. "Help me," it pleaded, a whisper against my ear so real I spun around, expecting to see someone behind me. But there was no one. The room began to change, the walls cracking and peeling, revealing charred wood and blackened stone. The toys aged before my eyes, rotting and disintegrating into dust. The scream grew louder, more insistent. I understood then that this room held the key to the house's pain, the epicenter of the tragedy that had claimed so many lives. And it wanted me to witness it, to share in the torment that had been its existence for so long. As the room decayed around me, the children's laughter returned, but it was different now, filled with sorrow and regret. They were not the tormentors, they were the tormented, and they needed me to free them. But how? The answer lay in the scream, in the voice begging for help. I had to listen, to understand what it wanted. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me, and when I opened them again, I was no longer alone. Story 5. The Gaze of Madness. I always admired Clara's passion for painting, the way her delicate hands danced with the brush, giving life to inanimate canvases. But recently, her art has taken a dark turn. It began subtly, with shadows lurking in the corners of her portraits, but it wasn't long before those shadows crept into our lives. The first portrait was of our neighbor, Mr. Jenkins. Clara painted him sitting in his armchair, a newspaper in hand, but his eyes, they were hollow, as if gouged out by an unseen force. I tried to dismiss it as an artistic choice, but unease settled in my stomach like a coiled snake. As days passed, Clara grew more distant, her nights consumed by fervent strokes of her brush. Each new portrait featured someone we knew, each with the same haunting, eyeless gaze. It was as if she was painting them not as they were, but as they were destined to be. I decided to confront her, to understand the meaning behind these macabre images. But when I entered her studio, the air felt charged, heavy with whispers that echoed from the canvases. Clara stood in the center, her eyes reflecting a void that seemed to beckon me. "Clara, what's happening to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She turned slowly, her lips parting in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They're watching us," she said, "and now they can see no more." That night, I heard screams. Not from Clara, but from Mr. Jenkins' house. The next morning, we found out he had passed away, his eyes missing. The town was in shock, but Clara, she just continued to paint. The town's whispers grew louder after Mr. Jenkins' death, but none as loud as the ones in our home. Clara's obsession with her grotesque portraits intensified, and with each brushstroke, a piece of my wife seemed to vanish into the canvas. One evening, I found her painting by candlelight, her figure almost ethereal in the flickering shadows. The portrait before her was of our dear friend Emily, her face twisted in an expression of terror, eyes hollowed out. A chill ran down my spine as Clara whispered, "She's next." I pleaded with Clara to stop, to seek help, but she was beyond my reach, lost in a trance. Her only response was a haunting giggle that didn't sound like her at all. That night, I lay awake, listening to the sound of her painting, the bristles scratching like claws against the canvas. The next day, news arrived that chilled me to the bone. Emily was found in her home, unresponsive, her eyes gone. The police were baffled, no signs of forced entry, no clues, just the eerie echo of my wife's prediction. Desperate for answers, I scoured Clara's studio, searching for any clue that could explain the madness. Hidden among her supplies, I found an ancient-looking tome, its pages filled with rituals and incantations. The book seemed to hum with a malevolent energy, and I wondered if this was the source of Clara's transformation. That night, as the moon cast a pale light through the windows, I confronted Clara. "What have you done?" I demanded, the book clutched in my hands. She turned to me, her eyes now a void of darkness. "I've opened their eyes to the unseen," she said. "And soon, you will see too." The town of Eldridge was on edge, the air thick with fear and suspicion. Clara's paintings had become a grim prophecy, and I feared I was living in a nightmare from which I could not awaken. The once vibrant colors of her art now seemed to bleed away, leaving only the stark horror of those empty gazes. I watched her, this stranger who wore my wife's face, as she began her next portrait. This time, it was me sitting in our living room, a book in my lap, eyes not there. My heart raced as she added the final touches, her chuckle a discordant melody in the silence. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Clara turned, her eyes hollow pits in the dim light. "It's not me," she whispered. "It's the eyes. They see too much. They have to be closed." I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, the image of my own defaced portrait haunting every moment. I had to end this madness. That night, I took the cursed tome and set it ablaze, hoping to sever the connection that had ensnared my wife. But as the flames consumed the pages, a scream pierced the night. It was Clara. I rushed to her studio, the smell of burnt paper clinging to me. The room was in chaos, her paintings torn, and in the center of it all stood Clara, her eyes wide with terror. "They're here," she screamed. "The ones without sight." I reached for her, but it was too late. Shadows swirled around us, and I felt a coldness like the touch of death. When the darkness cleared, Clara was gone, and in her place, a new portrait. It was her, beautiful and serene, but her eyes, they were just empty sockets. The police found no trace of her, and the town mourned the loss of the gentle artist they once knew. But I knew the truth. I could feel the eyes on me, always watching, waiting. And as I sit here, writing this, I can't help but wonder, when will they come for me? Story 6. Whispers of the Absent. I remember the chill that ran down my spine the night it all began. The clock struck midnight, and the house was silent except for the creaking of the old wooden floors. My husband's voice, usually warm and inviting, had taken on a distant, cold tone over the phone as he informed me he'd be working late again. It was becoming a pattern, one that left a hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach. Days turned into nights, and his absences grew longer. The once comforting presence of his belongings around the house now felt like remnants of a life slipping away. I decided to surprise him at his office with dinner, but the receptionist's words stopped me cold. "He hasn't been here in weeks," she said, her eyes not meeting mine. Confusion and dread began to intertwine as I drove home, the city lights blurring past. The house felt different as I stepped inside. The air was thick, and a faint whisper seemed to echo through the halls. I called out for him, but only silence answered back. That night, as I lay in bed, the whispers grew louder, forming words I couldn't quite understand. They seemed to be calling me, pulling me towards the basement, a place my husband had turned into his personal sanctuary for his late-night work. With each step down the creaking staircase, the temperature dropped, and the whispers became a chorus. The basement door groaned open, revealing a room bathed in an otherworldly glow. His desk was covered in strange symbols and old, leather-bound books. The phone sat off the hook, static filling the air. As I approached the desk, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. I reached out to touch the books, and the room spun. The walls melted away, revealing a vast, dark void where shadows danced just beyond my reach. His voice called out to me from the abyss, begging me to join him. I woke up on the floor, the morning light filtering through the small basement windows. It had to have been a dream, a nightmare fueled by stress and loneliness. But the echo of his voice lingered, and the books remained on the desk, their pages fluttering as though caught in a breeze that didn't exist. The whispers didn't cease with the morning light, they clung to the edges of my consciousness, a relentless tide eroding the shores of my sanity. I tried to go about my day, but the house felt like a mausoleum, each room a testament to a life that was slowly unraveling. I found myself drawn to his belongings, searching for any clue that might explain his mysterious absence. In the pocket of his favorite coat, I discovered a crumpled note with an address scrawled in his handwriting. It was for a place I'd never heard of, in a part of town that people avoided after dark. As dusk settled, I stood before the dilapidated building, the address matching the note. The air was heavy with a silence that seemed to scream. I pushed open the door, and the smell of decay and old secrets hit me like a physical force. Inside, the building was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, each more decrepit than the last. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, guiding me deeper into the bowels of the structure. I stumbled upon a room that sent shivers down my spine, a replica of our basement, complete with the same symbols and books. In the center of the room, a phone identical to ours sat on a desk. It rang, slicing through the silence. I answered, and my husband's voice filled my ear, "Come find me." The line went dead before I could respond. I turned to leave, but the room had changed. The door was gone, replaced by a wall of solid brick. Panic clawed at my chest as the whispers grew into mocking laughter. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and I felt eyes upon me, watching from the darkness. The room began to spin, and I fell to my knees, the laughter echoing in my mind. Then, silence. I looked up to find myself back in our basement, the phone still ringing insistently. I reached for it, my hand trembling, and the world went black. I awoke to the oppressive darkness of the basement, the phone's shrill ring still piercing the silence. My hands fumbled for the receiver, and I brought it to my ear, my voice barely a whisper. "Where are you?" I pleaded into the void. His voice came through, a distant echo, "Follow the shadows. They will lead you to me." The line went dead once more, but this time, a path of faintly glowing footprints appeared on the dusty floor, leading into the darkness beyond the basement. I followed the spectral trail as it wound through the house, each step resonating with the heartbeat of the unknown. The footprints led me to the attic, a place we seldom ventured. The air was thick with the past, and memories clung to the cobwebs like trapped flies. The attic was transformed into a shrine of our life together, photos and mementos arranged in a macabre display. At the center, a lone candle burned, its flame casting elongated shadows that twisted and writhed on the walls. And there, in the flickering light, I saw him, or what was left of him. His apparition flickered at the edge of reality, his eyes hollow pools of despair. "I'm trapped," he whispered, his voice a chilling breeze. "Trapped in the void, and it's pulling me further away." The shadows around him seemed alive, tendrils reaching out, beckoning me closer. I reached out to him, my hand passing through the cold mist where he stood. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the truth. The man I loved was gone, lost to a realm beyond my reach. But the shadows whispered promises, sweet lies of a reunion if only I would step into their embrace. The candle sputtered out, plunging the attic into darkness. The shadows surged forward, and I felt their icy touch. A scream lodged in my throat as I was pulled towards the abyss, the boundary between our worlds blurring. And then, silence. Story 7. Caller unknown. Every night, as the world succumbed to silence, a whisper would slice through the stillness of my room. It was faint, almost gentle, like a secret meant only for me. "Evelyn," it would say, my name hanging in the air, a ghostly caress that left me frozen beneath my sheets. I'd convinced myself it was just the wind, or the house settling, or my own imagination running wild. Until tonight. Tonight, the whispers grew insistent, a demanding undertone that beckoned me from the safety of my bed. I rose, a puppet drawn by invisible strings, and approached the closet. The door creaked open, revealing the darkness within, and there, buried under years of forgotten memories, was an old phone. Its screen was cracked, the edges caked with dust, but it was the missed calls that sent a chill down my spine. Dozens of them, all from my number. I reached out, hesitating as my fingers brushed against the cold plastic. The phone vibrated suddenly, startling me. Another call from my number. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear, and the whispering enveloped me, louder now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to echo from a place not of this world. "Come to us, Evelyn," they urged, a symphony of the damned that knew my name. The line went dead, and the silence returned, heavier than before. I looked around, the familiarity of my room now tainted with an unseen presence. The whispers had stopped, but I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, a sick joke, but the fear that gripped my heart was real. As dawn approached, the whispers returned, a relentless tide that promised no reprieve. I knew then that I had to uncover the truth behind these spectral calls. My search led me to the attic, where the past lay hidden beneath layers of dust and regret. There, I found an old diary, its pages yellowed with age, the writings of a woman who once lived in this house and heard the same whispers. The diary spoke of a presence, an entity that lingered in the shadows, bound by a tragedy that had unfolded within these walls. It was a story of love and loss, of a life cut short and a spirit that refused to move on. The woman had tried to help, to release the tormented soul, but her efforts had only drawn its attention, its whispers now a haunting melody that played only for her. As I closed the diary, the whispers grew louder, a desperate plea that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I knew I couldn't ignore them any longer. I had to face whatever lurked in the shadows, to confront the echoes of the unseen that called my name. But as I steeled myself for the unknown, the phone rang once more, the caller ID flashing my own number, and I knew that this was only the beginning. The whispers guided me, a beacon in the darkness, as I ascended the creaking steps to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against me. The attic was a time capsule, a place where memories lingered in the dust motes that danced in the shafts of light. "Evelyn," the voices called, more urgent now, as if excited by my arrival. I began to sift through the relics of the past, each item a piece of the puzzle that was this house's history. An old photograph caught my eye, a family portrait that seemed to stare back at me with hollow eyes. The faces were familiar, too familiar. It was then I realized they were my ancestors, and the whispers were a legacy passed down through generations. The phone in my pocket vibrated, another call from my number. I answered, and the whispers grew into a scream, a sound so harrowing it threatened to shatter my sanity. "Release us," they cried, and the attic spun, the walls bleeding shadows that reached out for me. I dropped the phone, and it shattered on the wooden floor, the screen going black. In the silence that followed, a diary fell from a shelf, landing open at a page marked by a dried rose. The entry was dated exactly 100 years ago, and it spoke of a curse, a family doomed to be haunted by the spirits of those they had wronged. My blood ran cold as I read the last words. Only when the debt is paid will the whispers cease. I needed answers, and I knew where to find them. The local library held the archives of the town's history, and there, amidst the brittle pages of the past, I found the truth. My family had built their fortune on sorrow, a tragedy that had claimed many lives. And now, those souls demanded retribution. Night fell as I returned home, the whispers growing louder with the darkness. They were angry, their voices an army that filled the house. I could feel them closing in, the air thick with their rage. I had to make it right, to appease the spirits that my family had wronged. But how? The answer came in a vision, a memory not my own. A hidden room in the house, a place where the truth lay buried. I followed the whispers, and they led me to a wall that wasn't a wall. With trembling hands, I pushed against the wood, and it gave way, revealing a room lost to time. And there, in the center, was a phone, its line cut, but it rang, and I knew I had to answer. The hidden room was a mausoleum of secrets, its walls lined with whispers that spoke of untold stories. The air was heavy with the scent of time, and the dust swirled around me like spirits disturbed from their slumber. The phone sat on a pedestal, an artifact of a bygone era, its rings slicing through the silence like a siren's call. I approached it, each step a defiance of the fear that clawed at my insides. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of the damned that filled the room with their sorrow. Answer, they urged, their voices a blend of anger and desperation. I reached out, my hand trembling, and picked up the receiver. Evelyn, a voice said, clear and resonant, unlike the fragmented whispers. It was a voice that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, from a place where light could not reach. You have unsealed the gateway. You must now face the consequences of your lineage. The room spun, and I saw them, the spirits of those wronged, their forms flickering like flames in the dark. They circled me, their faces twisted in anguish, their eyes pleading for release. What must I do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Balance must be restored, the voice answered. A life for a life. The debt must be paid. I understood then, the price of my family's sins. A sacrifice was required, a soul to appease the spirits and end the curse. I dropped the phone, and it shattered into pieces, the line going silent. The spirits advanced, their forms becoming more defined, more threatening. I backed away, my mind racing for a solution. There had to be another way, a way to break the cycle without more loss. Then, in a moment of clarity, I remembered the diary, the woman who had tried to help. She had spoken of a ritual, an ancient rite that could banish the spirits forever. I had to find it, to perform it before it was too late. The whispers turned into screams, the spirits' anger palpable as they sensed my intention. I raced through the house, the diary in my hands, the words of the ritual a path to freedom. I began to chant, the ancient language foreign but powerful on my tongue. The house shook, the very foundations trembling as the ritual took effect. The spirits howled, their forms dissolving into the air, their whispers fading into nothingness. And then, silence. The curse was broken, the debt paid by knowledge and courage rather than blood. But as I looked around, the victory felt hollow. The phone lay in pieces, a reminder of the cost of my family's legacy. And in the silence, I heard it, a new whisper, one that chilled me to the bone. Thank you, Evelyn, it said, a voice that was not there before. The end of the curse, or the beginning of something new. Story 8. Being watched. I awoke to an unsettling silence, the kind that screams louder than any noise. The other side of the bed was cold, and I reached out, finding nothing but the wrinkled sheets where my husband should have been. Panic fluttered in my chest as I sat up, the darkness of the room pressing in on me like a physical force. My hand fumbled for the lamp, and light flooded the space, revealing the stark emptiness of the room. His phone lay on the nightstand, its screen casting an eerie glow. I picked it up, and a chill ran down my spine. The phone displayed a live video feed, our bedroom, from an angle I couldn't place. My heart raced as I scanned the room, searching for the hidden camera's lens. The walls seemed to close in, each shadow a hiding place for unseen eyes. The video feed flickered, and for a moment, I saw a figure standing in the corner of the room. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the phone, the figure was gone, and the feed was back to normal. Was I imagining things? My mind raced with questions, but no answers came. I tried calling my husband, but he didn't respond. The house was silent, too silent. I ventured out of the bedroom, my steps hesitant. The hallway stretched before me, each door a barrier to an unknown terror. I opened them one by one, finding nothing but the remnants of our life together. The last door led to the basement, and as I descended the creaking stairs, the air grew colder. The basement was shrouded in darkness, and I fumbled for the switch. The lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. That's when I saw it, the outline of a door that hadn't been there before. I approached, my curiosity warring with fear. The door was old, the wood swollen with age, and it groaned as I pushed it open. Beyond lay a room I had never seen, filled with monitors showing live feeds from all over the house. And there, in the center of the room, was my husband, his eyes wide with terror as he stared at something just out of view. "Sarah, run," he screamed, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind me, and the lights went out. I was plunged into darkness, the sound of my husband's warning echoing in my ears. The darkness was absolute, a void where even the concept of light seemed a distant memory. My breaths came in short gasps, each one a shuddering intake of the cold, stale air of the hidden room. I reached out, my hands brushing against cold monitors and tangled wires. The screens were off now, but I could feel the presence of the cameras, their lenses pointed at me like accusing fingers. "Sarah, listen to me." My husband's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "You need to find the tapes. It's the only way to understand." His words were cryptic, and I strained my ears to catch every syllable. "Tapes? What tapes?" I stumbled through the darkness, my hands finally closing around a stack of old VHS tapes. They felt heavy with significance, and I clutched them to my chest as if they were a lifeline. I needed to find a way out, to bring these tapes into the light. The door remained firmly shut, and in my desperation, I pounded against the wood, my cries for help swallowed by the thick walls. It was then that I heard it, a soft, mocking laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The sound twisted around me, a serpentine echo that chilled me to the bone. I sank to the floor, the tapes beside me, and closed my eyes. I focused on the sound of my own breathing, trying to push away the fear. That's when I noticed it, the faintest glimmer of light beneath a section of the wall. A hidden exit? I pressed against the wall, and to my amazement, it swung open, revealing a narrow passageway. The light was coming from the other end, and I crawled toward it, the laughter following me like a persistent shadow. The passage led to the attic, a place I hadn't been since we moved in. Dust motes danced in the beam of light that filtered through a crack in the roof. The attic was filled with relics of the past, and among them, I found an old VCR. It was as if everything was laid out for me, a path predetermined by some malevolent force. I inserted the first tape, and the screen flickered to life. The footage was grainy, but I could make out the interior of our house. It was a recording of us, unaware, our every move documented by the watcher in the walls. But it was the final scene that froze my blood, a figure, cloaked in shadow, standing over our bed as we slept, its hand reaching out. The tape hissed and spat as it reached its end, the screen now filled with static that seemed to crawl into the room, making the shadows twitch and sway. I sat frozen, the image of the shadowy figure burned into my retinas. It was clear now, we were not alone in our own home. But who, or what, was this watcher? I ejected the tape, my hands trembling. The attic felt smaller, the air thicker. I could feel eyes on me, though I was supposedly alone. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to watch the rest of the tapes. But did I dare? With a resolve I didn't know I possessed, I loaded the next tape. This one was different, it started with a date from several years before we moved in. The footage showed the previous occupants, a happy family, unaware of the camera. But as the tape played, their demeanor changed. They grew paranoid, scared. And then, they disappeared, one by one, until the house was empty. A pattern was emerging, and a sick feeling settled in my stomach. We were part of a cycle, a game, and the watcher was keeping score. I fast-forwarded through the tapes, seeing family after family fall victim to the unseen terror. And then, the last tape, it was labeled with today's date. I pressed play, and my blood ran cold. It was me, watching the tapes, the camera capturing my every reaction. The watcher had anticipated this moment. I was not the observer, I was the observed. And then, the camera angle changed, and I saw it, a dark figure emerging from the shadows behind me. I spun around, but the attic was empty. The laughter returned, a cacophony of madness that filled the space. I was not alone. The watcher was here, with me, in the attic. I could feel its presence, a weight on my back, a breath on my neck. "Sarah," a voice whispered, so close it could have been an embrace. "You've played your part beautifully." I swung wildly, my fists hitting nothing but air. The voice continued, mocking, cruel. "But every story must come to an end, and this is yours." The light flickered, and in the brief moments of darkness, I saw it, the watcher, a mere outline of a figure, devoid of features, yet full of malice. When the light returned, it was gone, but the voice remained. "Look behind you, Sarah. See the truth." I turned to the screen, and the final scene played. It was my husband, tied up, fear etched on his face. And behind him, the watcher, its hand reaching out to switch off the camera. The screen went black, and the attic plunged into darkness. The laughter echoed, a sound that would haunt me forever. I was left in the dark, the watcher's presence ever near, its intentions unknown. The end of the tape was the end of my story, and the beginning of my nightmare. Story 9. What's left of the reflection? I always believed our house harbored secrets, nestled within its creaking walls and under the loose floorboards. But nothing prepared me for the evening my daughter, Lily, came to me, her face pale as the moon, whispering, "Mommy, why doesn't my reflection look like me?" I followed her to her room, where the antique mirror stood like a silent sentinel. There, in the glass, was Lily's reflection, but it was wrong. The smile was too wide, too knowing, and the eyes were pits of darkness that seemed to swallow the light. Each night, the reflection's grin grew more grotesque, and its eyes darker. Lily stopped sleeping, and I found her often, standing before the mirror, conversing in hushed tones with her other self. I overheard her once, asking, "What do you want?" The reflection's reply sent chills down my spine, "To be seen." The air grew colder with each passing day, and the house seemed to groan in protest. I decided to cover the mirror, but that night, the sounds of shattering glass echoed through the house. Rushing to Lily's room, the mirror was intact, but the reflection was gone. In its place, a void that seemed to beckon us closer. We left the house, seeking refuge with my sister. But even there, in the safety of her modern apartment, I caught glimpses of that eerie smile in reflective surfaces, the TV screen, windows, even in my sister's eyes. Lily's behavior became erratic. She'd laugh at nothing or whisper to empty corners. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood, Lily vanished. I searched frantically, my heart racing, until I found her in the bathroom, the lights flickering, her small hand reaching towards the mirror. Her reflection was back, but it wasn't her. It was something else, something sinister, wearing my daughter's skin like a costume. As I pulled her away, the reflection spoke, its voice a symphony of nightmares. "You can't leave us. We are a part of you now." I held Lily tight, vowing to never let her near another mirror. But as we turned to leave, I caught my own reflection. It was smiling back at me, eyes as black as the void that had taken residence in our home. The days blurred into a single, unending nightmare. Lily's condition worsened. She spoke less and less, her eyes always fixed on something I couldn't see. I caught her whispering to shadows, her words a jumbled mix of pleas and threats. "They're watching," she'd say, her voice barely above a breath. "They're always watching. I sought help from every source I could think of, doctors, priests, even a medium who fled our home, her face ashen, muttering about dark presences. No one could help us. The reflection, or whatever it had become, was tethered to Lily, an invisible chain that grew tighter with each passing hour. One night, as a storm raged outside, the power flickered and died. In the candlelight, I saw them, figures in the shadows, their eyes like the reflections, voids of pure darkness. They whispered Lily's name, their voices a cacophony of discordant tones that seemed to claw at the very air. I did the only thing I could think of. I took Lily and ran. We drove without direction, the rain a relentless assault on the windshield. In every reflective surface, I saw them, a legion of smiling, dark-eyed specters. They were in the rearview mirror, on the wet streets, in the windows of the shops we passed. They were everywhere. We found an old motel on the outskirts of town, its neon sign flickering like a beacon of false hope. The room was musty, the air thick with the scent of decay. But it was a haven, a place without mirrors, without reflections. For a moment, I believed we might be safe. As Lily slept, I watched over her, the knife I had taken from the kitchen clenched in my hand. I heard them before I saw them, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. They were in the room with us, their forms barely visible in the darkness. "Give her to us," they hissed. "She belongs to us." I stood, ready to defend my daughter to my last breath. But then, the whispers stopped. The figures receded into the darkness, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a single, chilling laugh broke the stillness, and I knew our fight was far from over. The motel room felt like a tomb, the silence oppressive, suffocating. I watched Lily's chest rise and fall with shallow breaths, her face serene in sleep, a stark contrast to the turmoil that surrounded us. The whispers had ceased, but their absence was no comfort. It was the calm before the storm, a momentary reprieve in our relentless nightmare. I dared not sleep, my every sense alert for the return of the shadows. The knife's handle was slick with my sweat, its blade catching the faint light from the neon sign outside. Time lost meaning as I sat there, waiting, praying for dawn to break the night's hold. But the darkness was patient, and when the whispers returned, they were different, urgent, angry. "She is ours," they hissed, the sound like sandpaper against my skull. "You cannot protect her forever." I stood, my resolve hardening. "I can, and I will," I whispered back, defiance my shield against their malevolence. The shadows coalesced into forms, more substantial than before, their eyes burning holes in the fabric of reality. They advanced, a tide of darkness that threatened to engulf us. I stood between them and Lily, the knife poised and ready. "Stay back," I warned, my voice steady despite the terror that clawed at my insides. They laughed, a sound that fractured the air, and in that moment, the veil between worlds tore asunder. The room filled with light, blinding and pure, and from it stepped a figure, Lily's true reflection, her eyes clear and bright. "Mommy," she said, her voice a balm to my frayed nerves. "You have to let me go." I couldn't comprehend, couldn't accept her words. "No," I sobbed, "I won't lose you." But she smiled, a smile of infinite sadness and love. "You never will," she assured me. "But I have to leave you now. It's the only way to save us both." The shadows recoiled from her radiance, their forms dissolving like mist in the sun. I held Lily's hand, tears streaming down my face, as she stepped into the light. And then, with a final, loving glance, she was gone. The room was silent once more, the neon light flickering its lonely vigil. I was alone, truly alone. But as I looked into the mirror, I saw not my reflection, but Lily's, her eyes as blue as the sky on a clear summer day. She smiled, and I knew she was at peace. But then, the smile twisted, morphing into something cruel, and the eyes darkened to an abyssal black. The laughter returned, cold and mocking, and I realized the horror was far from over. Story 10. The Vanishing Lineage. I had always been fascinated by the dusty corners of our old family home, where whispers of the past seemed to linger like cobwebs. It was during one of my explorations that I stumbled upon a box of old family photos in the attic. The musty scent of age wafted up as I lifted the lid, revealing layers of sepia-toned memories. But as I sifted through the images, a chill ran down my spine. In the first photo, a grand family reunion, I noticed my great-uncle, who had always been the life of the party, was missing from the cheerful group. Thinking it was an odd coincidence, I shuffled to the next photo, only to find that my grandmother, once seated at the head of the dining table, was now just an empty chair. With each photo, the pattern continued, relatives faded away, leaving behind vacant spaces and unclaimed objects. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. These were not mere photos, but a record of something far more sinister. As night fell, the house groaned under the weight of silence. I couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching me from the dark corners. I decided to confront my parents about the photos, but their bedroom was empty, their beds untouched and cold. Panic set in, and I raced back to the attic, the photos now my only link to my vanishing family. The attic was different at night, shadows stretching like grasping fingers. I pored over the photos again, searching for clues, when I heard a soft whisper, "Look closer." My hands trembled as I brought a photo to the dim light. There, in the background, was a figure I hadn't noticed before, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to be present in each disappearing act. The whisper had come from nowhere and everywhere at once, a voice like the rustling of dry leaves. My heart pounded as I peered into the darkness, half expecting the shadowy figure from the photos to materialize before me. But there was only silence. I turned my attention back to the photographs, my eyes tracing the outline of the mysterious silhouette that had invaded my family's history. With each photo, the figure grew clearer, and I began to notice details I had missed before, a faint smirk, a glint of something sinister in its stance. It was as if this entity fed on the presence of my loved ones, absorbing them into the void. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the attic's stale air. I wrapped my arms around myself, not just for warmth, but for a sense of security that was quickly slipping away. I needed answers, and the only place left to look was the family archives. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of the attic was a chest filled with journals and letters dating back generations. The dust made me cough, but I persisted, flipping through pages yellowed with age. That's when I found it, a journal entry from my great-great-grandfather, detailing a curse placed upon our family by a vengeful spirit, a shadow that would erase us from existence one by one. The story unfolded with each turn of the page. My ancestor had wronged a powerful entity, and in retaliation, it promised to haunt our lineage forever. I slammed the journal shut, my mind racing. Was this the price of sins long past? I quickly realized the implications. I was next. I decided to confront the shadow, to plead for the return of my family. As I spoke the words, the photos began to flutter as if caught in a breeze, though the air was still. A low hum filled the room, growing louder until it was all I could hear. And then, silence. I looked up to see the shadow standing before me, its form more defined than ever. Why? I managed to choke out. The shadow tilted its head, considering me, before it whispered a single word that chilled me to the bone. The word hung in the air, a whisper that seemed to echo through the very walls of the house. Repay. The shadow's demand was simple yet impossible. How could I repay a debt incurred by an ancestor whose sins were not my own? The shadow seemed to read my thoughts, its form blurring and shifting, as if it were a smudge of darkness on the fabric of reality. I pleaded, my voice breaking with desperation. How can I repay what I do not owe? The shadow remained silent, its presence a cold void that threatened to swallow me whole. I realized then that it was not seeking repayment in kind, but in spirit. It wanted a life for a life, a soul for a soul. The photos lay scattered at my feet, the faces of my family fading even from my memory. I could not let this entity take everything from me. There had to be another way. I scoured the journals for a solution, for any mention of a reversal or a ritual that could banish the shadow. And then, amidst the frantic pages, I found it, a ritual that could anchor the shadow to a physical form, rendering it powerless. The ingredients were bizarre but obtainable, a lock of hair from a loved one, ash from a tree struck by lightning, and a tear shed in true sorrow. I had the first two, but the last would require me to relive the pain of my losses, to truly mourn what the shadow had taken from me. As I began the ritual, the house seemed to breathe with me, the walls creaking in anticipation. I placed the items in a circle, my hands shaking as I lit the candle that would complete the binding. The shadow watched, its form wavering as the ritual took hold. It let out a scream that was not of this world, a sound that could shatter souls. And then, just as the candle flickered out, the shadow lunged at me, its form solidifying into something grotesque and human. I stumbled back, my heart racing as I realized the ritual had worked, but at what cost? The figure before me was no longer just a shadow, it was a mirror of my deepest fears, a manifestation of the family curse standing in the flesh. It smiled, a twisted grin that promised the game was not over. "You think you've won," it hissed, "but this is only the beginning." Story 11. The Silent Watcher. Every night, the silence of my room is broken by a presence. As the moon casts its pale light through the window, I feel it before I see it, a figure, dark and indistinct, standing at the foot of my bed. I close my eyes, hoping it's a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But each time I blink, it draws nearer, its form becoming clearer, and the air grows colder. I've tried to speak to it, to ask what it wants, but my words seem to fall on deaf ears. It just stands there, watching, waiting. The first time it happened, I thought it was a nightmare. But as the nights went on, the figure became a constant in my life, its presence more oppressive each time. The whispers started softly, unintelligible murmurs that I could barely hear. But they grew louder, more insistent, as if the figure was trying to communicate something urgent, something vital. I strain to understand, but the language is foreign, a series of hisses and sighs that make my skin crawl. One night, I gather the courage to reach out, my hand trembling as it moves through the space between us. To my horror, I feel nothing but the icy chill of the void. It's then that I realize this entity is not of this world, it's something else, something other. The days begin to blur together, each sunset bringing a sense of dread. I can't sleep, can't eat, can't think straight. My friends say I look drained, haunted. They don't know how right they are. I'm being haunted by something that won't let me go, that follows me into my dreams. As I sit up in bed, the figure looms over me, its face shrouded in shadow. I can feel its breath, cold and damp, as it leans in close. The whispers become clearer now, forming words I wish I could forget. "Soon," it hisses, "soon you will understand." I wake up screaming, the echo of the words soon ringing in my ears. It's a warning, a premonition of something terrible on the horizon. I know I can't ignore it any longer. I have to find out what this figure wants, why it's chosen me. But as I steel myself for the coming night, I can't shake the feeling that I might not like the answer. The days blur into a relentless cycle of fear and exhaustion. Each night, I lie in bed, my eyes wide open, waiting for the figure to appear. It's always the same, a shadowy silhouette, its form shifting like smoke. The whispers have become more coherent, a language that scrapes against my sanity. But still, I can't comprehend its message. I've tried researching ancient texts, seeking answers in forgotten rituals. The internet offers nothing but vague superstitions and ghost stories. My friends think I'm losing my mind, but I know better. This is real. The figure is real. And it wants something from me. One evening, as the moon hangs low in the sky, I decide to confront it. Armed with a flashlight and trembling resolve, I sit up and wait. The room grows colder, the air thick with anticipation. And then it appears, the Silent Watcher, as I've come to call it. Its eyes, two pinpricks of malevolence, lock onto mine. I raise the flashlight, illuminating its face. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, and a mouth that stretches impossibly wide. It's not human. It's something older, darker. "Why?" I manage to whisper. "Why are you here?" The figure tilts its head, its voice a spectral echo. "To warn you," it says. The veil is thinning. Reality frays at the edges. Soon, they will cross over. "Who?" I demand. "What do you mean?" It leans closer, its breath icy against my skin. The forgotten ones, it murmurs. The ones who hunger. They feed on fear, on doubt. And you, dear mortal, are their gateway. I shudder. The room seems to close in, the walls pressing against me. How do I stop it? You can't, it replies. But you can delay it. The whispers, they hold the key. Listen. Decode. Unravel their secrets. And then it's gone, fading into the darkness. I'm left alone, trembling, with a newfound purpose. The whispers, the unintelligible language, they're my only hope. I record them, play them backward, dissect their syllables. But the more I listen, the more I realize, they're not just words. They're memories, fragments of forgotten lives. As the nights pass, I piece together their meaning. The silent watcher was once like me, a curious soul who stumbled upon forbidden knowledge. And now, it's trapped, a sentinel between worlds. Its whispers are a plea for release, a desperate cry for salvation. But salvation comes at a cost. The forgotten ones hunger for a vessel, a conduit. And on the unwitting bridge. Every blink, every heartbeat, they draw closer. I see them now, flickering at the edge of my vision, their eyes hungry, their forms shifting. I've reached the heart of the mystery, but I'm no closer to understanding. What secrets lie within these whispers? What horrors await when the veil finally tears? And most importantly, how do I survive the night? The whispers have become my obsession. I've transcribed them, analyzed them, even played them backward in the dead of night. But their meaning eludes me, slipping through my fingers like smoke. The silent watcher's warning echoes in my mind. Decode. Unravel. Delay. I've barricaded my room, drawn salt circles, and burned sage. Anything to keep the forgotten ones at bay. But they're relentless. Their eyes, hunger incarnate, follow me wherever I go. They're not bound by walls or doors. They slip through the cracks, their forms flickering like dying flames. My sanity phrase. Sleep is a distant memory. Every blink brings them closer. I've tried to tell my friends, but they dismiss it as stress, lack of rest. They don't see the shadows that cling to my skin, the way the air thickens when they draw near. The whispers have changed. They're no longer random syllables. They tell a story, a fragmented tale of betrayal, sacrifice, and a forbidden pact. I piece together the fragments, desperate for answers. The silent watcher watches, its eyes hollow, its mouth a silent scream. I've traced the whispers to an old library, its shelves sagging under forgotten tomes. The librarian, a wizened woman with rheumy eyes, guides me to a dusty corner. The veil chronicles, she says. Forbidden knowledge. Read at your own peril. The pages smell of decay. The ink blurs, dances. I read about the forgotten ones, their hunger, their thirst for mortal vessels. They were once gods, banished for their cruelty. Now they hunger for redemption, a way back into our world. The ritual is clear. A sacrifice, a willing vessel. The whispers, their instructions, a map to their prison. Decode. Unravel. Delay. But delay for what? Redemption or damnation? I return home, trembling. The silent watcher awaits, its form more defined, its eyes pleading. Decode, it whispers. Save me. I close my eyes, listen to the whispers anew. The language shifts, becomes familiar. It's not ancient. It's mine, a reflection of my deepest fears, my darkest desires. The forgotten ones hunger for release. They hunger for me. I'm their vessel, their gateway. But redemption lies in sacrifice. I know what I must do. Tonight, I'll stand at the edge of the abyss. I'll speak the words, unravel the veil. The forgotten ones will cross over, and I'll be free, or consumed. And so, I wait. The room grows colder. The whispers rise, a crescendo of longing. The silent watcher nods, its eyes filled with gratitude. As I close my eyes, I see them, the forgotten ones, their forms shifting, their hunger insatiable. And I wonder, will redemption taste like salvation or despair? The veil trembles. The hour approaches. And I, the unwitting bridge, prepare to step into the abyss. Story 12. Don't trust the shadows. I always believed that the dead had a way of reaching out to the living, a whisper through the veil that separates our worlds. But nothing prepared me for the day I received a letter, postmarked and dated for today, in my deceased grandmother's handwriting. The message was cryptic: do not trust the shadows in your house, for they weave the darkness of another realm. The house, a Victorian relic passed down through generations, always had an eerie feel, with its creaking floors and drafty halls. But it was the shadows that felt alive, shifting and twisting in ways that defied the natural play of light. I tried to dismiss the letter as a cruel joke, but the signature at the bottom was undeniably hers, the same flourish I had seen on countless birthday cards and letters from my childhood. That night, the shadows seemed to press closer, and I could swear I heard whispers emanating from them, voices that were neither male nor female, speaking a language I felt I once knew. I stayed up, clutching the letter, trying to decipher its meaning. The shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and I felt a chill that didn't come from the night air. The following days were a blur of research and restless nights. I pored over old family albums, diaries, anything that could give me a clue. It was in a tattered journal of my grandmother's that I found mention of a family curse, tied to an ancient entity that lived in the shadows, feeding off the fears of the living. I decided to confront the shadows. Armed with salt and iron, I waited for nightfall. The house groaned as darkness enveloped it, and the shadows grew bold. They crept along the walls, stretching towards me with tendrils of darkness. I stood my ground, reciting incantations I had found in the journal, but the shadows only laughed, a sound like the rustling of dead leaves. As I reached the climax of the ritual, the shadows recoiled, and for a moment, I thought I had banished them. But then, they surged forward, and I felt a cold hand grip my heart. The room spun, and I fell to the floor, the letter fluttering out of my grasp. When I awoke, it was to a house bathed in sunlight. The shadows retreated to their corners. But the fear remained, a constant companion. I knew then that this was only the beginning, that the shadows would return with the night. And with each passing day, they grew more daring, more tangible, until I could almost make out figures within their dark embrace. The days blurred into nights, and I became a prisoner in my own home. The shadows grew bolder, their movements more deliberate. They whispered secrets, half-formed sentences that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to ignore them, but their presence gnawed at my sanity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I ventured into the attic, the heart of the house's darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the light from my lantern barely penetrated the gloom. The shadows clung to the eaves, twisting like smoke. I felt eyes upon me, unseen but watching. In a forgotten corner, I found an old wooden chest. Its hinges groaned as I opened it, revealing yellowed letters, dried flowers, and a tarnished silver locket. The locket held a sepia-toned photograph, a woman with eyes like midnight, her face etched with sorrow. My grandmother. I traced the contours of her face, wondering what secrets she had carried. The shadows gathered around me, their whispers growing louder. She made a pact, they hissed. A bargain with the darkness. I clutched the locket, my breath ragged. The shadows swirled, forming shapes, a twisted tree, a moonless sky, and a figure with elongated limbs. The entity from the journal, the one that fed on fear. Why? I demanded, my voice echoing in the attic. Why did she make this pact? The shadows converged, their edges sharp as razors. To protect her bloodline, they murmured. To keep the darkness at bay. But at what cost? I whispered. The shadows laughed, a chorus of voices. The firstborn, they said. The price was the firstborn child of each generation. My heart pounded. I was the firstborn. The shadows hungered for me. As I descended the attic stairs, the house seemed to breathe, a living entity with secrets woven into its walls. The letter lay on the kitchen table, its ink bleeding into the paper. You have one night, It read, "One night to break the curse." I stared at the shadows dancing on the walls. They knew my fear, tasted it like wine. But I had to confront them, find the truth buried in their depths. The locket hung heavy around my neck, a talisman against the darkness. And so, as the clock struck midnight, I stepped into the heart of the house, the basement. The shadows swirled, their voices rising to a crescendo. I closed my eyes, whispered the incantation, and waited for the darkness to consume me. The basement was a cavern of forgotten memories, its walls damp and pulsing with ancient secrets. I clutched the locket, its silver surface cold against my skin. The shadows gathered, their whispers a cacophony of dread. "You seek answers," they murmured. "But the truth is darker than you imagine." I stepped into the center of the room, the air thickening around me. The shadows swirled, revealing glimpses of otherworldly landscapes, a forest of twisted trees, a moonless sky where stars blinked like malevolent eyes. Why did my grandmother make the pact? I demanded, my voice echoing off the stone walls. The shadows converged, forming a figure, a woman with eyes like midnight. My grandmother. She stepped forward, her gaze unyielding. "To protect our bloodline," she said. "The darkness hungered for us, and so we struck a bargain. But the price was steep, the firstborn child of each generation." I clenched my fists. "And what happens if I break the curse?" The shadows laughed, a sound like the rustling of dead leaves. "The entity will consume you," they whispered. "Your fear, your essence, it will feed on you until nothing remains." I glanced at the locket, its weight a reminder of my duty. There must be another way. My grandmother's eyes softened. "There is," she said. "The veil between our worlds is thin. You must find the rift, the place where the shadows bleed into reality. There, you can confront the entity." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "And if I fail?" "Then the curse will continue," my grandmother said. "The shadows will claim you, child, and the cycle will repeat." I stepped toward the basement wall, tracing the cracks. The shadows surged, their voices urging me on. "Find the rift," they whispered. "Break the curse." And so, armed with the locket and the knowledge passed down through generations, I began my search. The house resisted, its walls shifting, doors leading to dead ends. But I persisted, driven by love and fear. Finally, in the attic, I found it, a tear in reality, a shimmering veil that pulsed with malevolence. The shadows gathered, their forms elongated, hungry. I stepped through, my heart pounding. On the other side, I faced the entity, a creature of smoke and nightmares. Its eyes bore into mine, and I felt my fear rise like a tide. But I remembered my grandmother's sacrifice, her love for our bloodline. "I break the curse," I said, my voice steady. "I free my bloodline from this darkness." The entity laughed, a sound that echoed through the void. "You cannot escape your fate," it whispered. "The shadows are eternal." But I held up the locket, its silver surface blazing. "Love is stronger than fear," I said. "And I choose love." The entity recoiled, its form unraveling. "You fool," it hissed. "The shadows will find another way." And then, with a final surge of darkness, it vanished, leaving me standing in the attic, the veil sealed behind me. But as I descended the stairs, I felt a presence, a whisper in the shadows. "My child, unborn but waiting." The curse was broken, but the darkness would never truly leave. And so, I vowed to protect my bloodline, to keep the shadows at bay. For love was my weapon, and fear my shield. Story 13. The Uninvited Figure. Every night, the ritual was the same. I'd lock my bedroom door, a quaint old brass key turning in a lock that creaked with age. The comforting click was supposed to keep the world out, to keep me safe. But it never did. Each night, I'd wake to find the door ajar, an inky blackness filling the space beyond. And there, in the void, stood a figure, a silent sentinel whose gaze I could feel but never see. The first time it happened, I told myself it was a dream. The second, a trick of the light. But as the nights wore on, the presence became undeniable. It never moved, never spoke, just watched. I began to dread sleep, the twilight hours where the world blurred and my watcher would appear. I sought help, of course. Friends stayed over, but they saw nothing. A locksmith changed the locks, yet still, the door would open. Even a priest blessed my room, his holy water shimmering in the air before settling on the old wooden floor. But that night, like all others, I woke to the open door. The figure began to invade my waking world. I'd see it out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement and reflections, a silhouette in the crowd. It was always just out of focus, a smudge on the lens of my life. My days grew long and weary, my nights a parade of terrors. I decided to confront it. One night, armed with nothing but a desperate courage, I stayed awake. The clock ticked loudly, each second a drumbeat to my impending encounter. Midnight came and went, and then, as the moon reached its zenith, the door creaked open. It stood there, as always, a figure cloaked in shadows. I stepped forward, my heart a hammer in my chest. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice a whisper lost in the vastness of the night. There was no answer, just the sense of something ancient and endless watching me from the dark. I reached out, my hand trembling, and as my fingers brushed the void where it stood, the figure remained elusive, a phantom that defied explanation. I researched ancient texts, delving into forgotten rituals and whispered legends. The Watcher, they called it, a guardian of thresholds, a sentinel between worlds. But why me? Why my room? I began to document my encounters, filling notebooks with sketches and desperate scribbles. The Watcher never moved, but its presence grew heavier, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I stopped inviting friends over, fearing they'd see the truth, that they'd glimpse the abyss beyond my door. Sleep became a battleground. I'd lie awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for the inevitable. The door would creak open, and there it would stand, framed by moonlight. Its eyes, if it had eyes, bore into mine, a hunger that chilled my soul. I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my voice always failed me. One night, I decided to confront it again. Armed with a flashlight and a borrowed camera, I sat in the darkness, waiting. The clock ticked, each second echoing like a heartbeat. At midnight, the door swung open, and the Watcher stepped into my room. I snapped a photo, the flash illuminating its form. But when I checked the camera, the image was blank, just an empty room. The Watcher had vanished, leaving only a lingering coldness in the air. I wept that night, my tears mixing with frustration and fear. The next morning, I developed the film. The photograph revealed nothing, just an empty room, as if the Watcher had never been there. But then I noticed a detail, the reflection in the mirror. My face, pale and wide-eyed, stared back at me. And behind me, in the darkness, a shadow, the Watcher. I couldn't escape it. It followed me to work, to the grocery store, even into my dreams. I'd wake, drenched in sweat, the door wide open, the Watcher standing over me. Its silence was maddening. What did it want? Why torment me? I researched more, desperate for answers. The Watcher was tied to ancient rites, a guardian of forbidden knowledge. Some said it was a harbinger of doom, a sign that the veil between worlds was thinning. But what did it want with me? And then, one night, it spoke. A whisper, barely audible, but it echoed through my mind. "Open the door," it said. "Cross the threshold." But I couldn't. Fear rooted me to the spot. The Watcher's form shifted, elongating, becoming something more, something monstrous. And as it reached for me, I woke, my room bathed in moonlight, the door wide open. The Watcher's whispers haunted my waking hours. "Open the door," it urged, its voice like a blade against my sanity. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The threshold called to me, a siren song that promised answers, or perhaps damnation. I studied the old key, its brass worn smooth by countless turns. It was more than a mundane lock, it was a gateway. The Watcher had chosen me, and now I had a choice. Fear clenched my gut, but curiosity drove me forward. The night was thick with anticipation. I stood before the door, the key heavy in my hand. The watcher waited, its form shifting in the shadows. Cross the threshold, it whispered, and I knew I had no other path. The key slid into the lock, and I turned it. The door swung open, revealing darkness beyond. I stepped over the threshold, my bare feet touching cold stone. The watcher followed, its presence now corporeal, its eyes, yes, it had eyes, fixed on me. The room on the other side was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Walls of obsidian, etched with symbols older than time. A ceiling lost in shadows, and a floor that seemed to ripple like water. And at the center stood an ancient mirror, its surface reflecting not my own face, but something else, something monstrous. The watcher gestured toward the mirror. "Look," it said, its voice echoing through the chamber. "See the truth." I stepped closer, my breath fogging the glass. The reflection revealed a city, my city, but twisted, decayed. Buildings leaned like drunken sentinels, streets cracked and overgrown. And in the distance, a tower rose, its spire disappearing into the roiling clouds. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "The Veil," the watcher replied. "A realm between worlds. You've glimpsed it every night, but now you stand within." "Why?" I demanded. "Why torment me?" The watcher's eyes bore into mine. "Because you're the key," it said. "The one who can bridge the gap. The one who can set things right." "But how?" I whispered. "Find the tower," the watcher instructed. "Climb to its peak. There, you'll find the truth, and a choice." "What choice?" "To close the veil forever," the watcher said, "or to unleash what lies beyond." I hesitated, my mind a tempest of fear and wonder. The tower beckoned, its shadow stretching toward me. The watcher stepped back, fading into the darkness. "Choose wisely," it warned. "For the veil hungers." And so, I stepped through the mirror, leaving my world behind. The tower awaited, its secrets hidden in its heights. The watcher's final words echoed in my mind, "The threshold is open. The choice is yours." And as I climbed, the veil whispered, promising salvation or damnation. The truth lay ahead, and I could only pray that my choice would save us all. Story 14. The Last Invitation. I always believed in the supernatural, but never did I think it would come knocking on my door, quite literally. It was a dreary Thursday evening when I found the envelope, no stamp, no postmark, just my name in cursive silver ink, Alex Mercer. Inside, a single card with the words, "You are cordially invited to the funeral of Alex Mercer." The date and time were today, now. My heart raced as I stood frozen, the card slipping from my numb fingers. The room felt colder, the shadows in the corners of my living room seemed to stretch towards me. I could hear the faintest whisper, like someone calling out from a distance. Was this a sick joke? Or had I somehow slipped into an alternate reality where I was no longer among the living? I decided to confront this head-on. I grabbed my coat and keys, the invitation now tucked securely in my pocket. The address led me to an old chapel on the outskirts of town, one I'd never noticed before. Its Gothic spires pierced the foggy night sky, and as I approached, the large oak doors creaked open, as if expecting me. The chapel was dimly lit by candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. I could see my breath in the air as I walked down the aisle, the echo of my footsteps my only companion. At the altar, a closed casket surrounded by white lilies, the scent overpowering. My name was on the plaque. Sitting in the pews were figures, shrouded in darkness, their faces obscured. I felt their eyes on me, heavy with sorrow and something else, accusation. I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my voice was swallowed by the silence of the chapel. As I reached out to touch the casket, a chill ran down my spine. The whispers grew louder, and I could make out words now. "Why did you leave us, Alex?" I spun around, but the figures were gone, leaving me alone with the casket and the creeping dread that something was terribly wrong. The chapel's air clung to my skin like damp cobwebs. I glanced back at the closed doors, but they were sealed shut. The whispers persisted, now louder, more insistent. "Why did you leave us, Alex?" They hissed, as if the very walls held their secrets. I approached the casket, my breath visible in the frigid air. The lilies seemed to sway, their petals brushing against the polished wood. My fingers trembled as I reached for the lid. The hinges groaned, and I half expected to find my own lifeless body inside. But there was nothing, only darkness. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a malevolent wind. I turned to face the pews, and there they were, the figures, still shrouded, still accusing. Their eyes bore into mine, and I felt their pain, their longing. Who were they? Why did they think I had abandoned them? "Alex," a voice echoed from the shadows. I spun around, but no one stood there. "Alex," it repeated, closer this time. I followed the sound, my heart pounding. It led me to a side door, cracked open just enough to reveal a narrow corridor. The whispers beckoned me forward. I stepped into the darkness, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The walls seemed to pulse, as if they held memories etched into their very fibers. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath forming misty tendrils. The corridor twisted and turned, leading deeper into the chapel's hidden recesses. And then I saw it, a flickering light at the end of the passage. I quickened my pace, drawn toward it like a moth to flame. The light emanated from a small room, its door ajar. Inside, an old mirror hung on the wall, its silvered surface tarnished with age. But it wasn't my reflection that stared back at me. Instead, I saw them, the figures from the pews. Their eyes were hollow, their faces etched with sorrow. They reached out, their ghostly hands pressing against the glass. "Alex," they whispered, their voices merging into one. "Help us." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. Who were they? What did they want from me? And why had I received an invitation to my own funeral? The mirrors seemed to ripple, distorting their forms. And then, as if in response to my unspoken question, the glass cracked, spiderweb fractures spreading outward. The room plunged into darkness, and the whispers grew louder, more desperate. "Help us, Alex," they pleaded. But how could I help ghosts? What unfinished business tied me to them? I had no answers, only fear gnawing at my insides. As I backed away from the broken mirror, the corridor shifted, elongating, twisting like a nightmare. The chapel itself seemed to breathe, inhaling my confusion and exhaling dread. And then, just as I reached the door, a single word echoed through the darkness: "Stay." The word "stay" echoed through the chapel, reverberating off the ancient stones. My heart pounded, and I hesitated at the door. What choice did I have? I was trapped in a nightmare, caught between the living and the dead. The figures in the mirror had become more than just ghosts, they were a part of me now, their sorrow etched into my very soul. I stepped back into the corridor, the walls closing in. The whispers followed, urging me forward. The chapel seemed to stretch, its dimensions warping. I stumbled, my breath ragged. The air tasted metallic, like blood. And then I saw it, a door, half hidden behind a tattered curtain. The room beyond was small, suffused with an otherworldly glow. In the center stood an ornate mirror, its frame adorned with twisted vines and thorns. The glass was pristine, untouched by time. I approached, my reflection wavering. But this time, it wasn't my face that stared back. The figures stood there, their eyes hollow, their forms translucent. They reached out, their fingers grazing the mirror's surface. "Alex," they whispered, their voices merging into a haunting chorus. "We need you." I clenched my fists, anger replacing fear. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. "Why am I here?" The mirror rippled, revealing scenes from my past. Memories flooded my mind, the accident, the guilt, the darkness that had consumed me. I had survived, but at what cost? The figures were my family, the ones I had lost. Their deaths haunted me, their faces etched into my nightmares. "You left us," my mother's voice echoed. "You survived, but we paid the price." Tears blurred my vision. "I didn't choose to live," I whispered. "I didn't want this." The mirror trembled, and the figures pressed closer. "You must make a choice," they said. "Stay with us, or return to the living." "But why?" I cried. "Why now?" Their eyes bore into mine. "The veil is thin," they murmured. "Tonight, the boundary between worlds fades. You can bridge the gap, Alex. Fulfill the pact." "Pact? What pact?" Desperation clawed at me. "What do I have to do?" "Bring us back," they said. "Open the door." I glanced at the curtain, its fabric frayed. Beyond lay darkness, an abyss that promised answers and oblivion. The figures waited, their longing palpable. I could feel their pain, their yearning for life. I stepped toward the curtain, my hand trembling. The whispers swirled, urging me on. "Open the door," they chanted. "Bring us home." And so, with a final breath, I pulled aside the curtain. The darkness swallowed me whole, and the chapel faded behind me. The figures followed, their hands outstretched. Together, we stepped into the void. Story 15. The Unseen Companion. I always believed our home was a sanctuary, a place where the laughter of our son, Jacob, filled the rooms with warmth. But that warmth turned cold the day he first spoke of his imaginary friend, Mr. Whispers. My wife, Sarah, laughed it off, saying it was normal for children to have imaginary friends. But I couldn't shake off the chill that settled in my spine. It started with small things, doors creaking open, toys found in odd places, and whispers that danced on the edge of hearing. Sarah insisted it was just Jacob's active imagination. But one night, as I tucked him in, he pointed to the dark corner of his room and said, "Mr. Whispers is sad tonight." I glanced over and saw nothing but shadows, yet the air felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. Days turned into weeks, and Jacob's behavior changed. He became withdrawn, his once bright eyes now dull. He spoke less of Mr. Whispers, but I caught him staring into empty spaces, a look of fear etched on his young face. Sarah remained oblivious, wrapped in her world of denial. Then came the night that changed everything. I awoke to a cold breeze and the sound of hushed conversation. Following the sound, I found Jacob sitting up in bed, talking to the darkness. "Why are you sad?" he asked. There was a pause, and then a voice, not Jacob's, whispered back, "Because you can see me." I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs. The room was dark, too dark. And there, in the corner, a darker shape loomed, a shadow within shadows, with eyes that glinted like shards of moonlight. It was real. It was watching. And it was not alone. As I stood there, paralyzed, the figure moved closer to Jacob, its form becoming clearer. It was a man, or something that once resembled a man, twisted by time and darkness. "Daddy?" Jacob's voice trembled. "Mr. Whispers wants to play." I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there. But my body wouldn't obey. The shadow man reached out, his hand passing through the moonlight, and I saw it, clear as day, a hand, pale and thin, reaching for my son. The days blurred into a nightmare. Mr. Whispers became a constant presence, lurking in the corners of our lives. I tried to convince Sarah, but she brushed it off as my overactive imagination. She didn't see the way Jacob's laughter turned hollow, how he whispered secrets to the shadows. One evening, I followed Jacob into the backyard. The moon hung low, casting elongated shadows across the grass. Jacob stood near the old oak tree, his small hand reaching out. "He's here," he said, eyes wide. "Mr. Whispers." I squinted into the darkness, and there it was, the shadow man, half hidden behind the tree. His eyes bore into mine, ancient and sorrowful. "Why does he follow you?" I asked Jacob, my voice trembling. "He says he's lonely," Jacob replied. "He wants to play hide-and-seek forever." I shivered. The air grew colder, and the whispers returned. They echoed through the night, weaving tales of forgotten souls and broken promises. Mr. Whispers was no imaginary friend. He was a relic of something darker, something that defied reason. Sarah remained oblivious, lost in her world of denial. But I couldn't ignore the truth. Mr. Whispers was real, and he hungered for something beyond play. His presence seeped into our home, twisting the walls, leaving invisible marks on our souls. I researched, desperate for answers. Old legends spoke of shadow companions, entities that clung to the living, feeding off their emotions. They whispered secrets, whispered madness, until the line between reality and nightmare blurred. One night, as the clock struck midnight, I confronted Mr. Whispers. "What do you want?" I demanded. His eyes flickered, and he stepped closer. "Release me," he whispered, his voice like wind through a graveyard. "Free me from this eternal game." I didn't understand. Release him from what? But the answer came when I saw Jacob, his eyes vacant, playing hide-and-seek with shadows that danced in the moonlight. Mr. Whispers had claimed my son, ensnaring him in a game that spanned centuries. The house groaned under the weight of secrets. I watched Jacob, his laughter now a distant memory, as he played with Mr. Whispers. They moved in sync, a macabre dance that defied reason. Sarah remained blissfully ignorant, her eyes veiled by denial. I delved deeper into the past. The old oak tree had stood for centuries, its roots sinking into forgotten soil. Legends whispered of a pact, a desperate bargain made by a grieving father. His son, lost to illness, had been promised eternal playmates. But the price was steep, the father's soul, forever bound to the shadows. Mr. Whispers was that lost father, cursed to wander, seeking companionship in the living. And Jacob, my innocent son, was the latest pawn in this spectral game. I had to break the cycle, sever the unseen threads that bound them. The whispers grew louder, urging me toward the truth. I confronted Mr. Whispers once more, standing beneath the ancient oak. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. His eyes flickered, and he extended a hand that held memories, pain, and longing. "Release me," he pleaded. "Free me from this torment." "But at what cost?" I asked. "What will happen to Jacob?" Mr. Whispers leaned closer, his breath icy against my skin. "A choice," he murmured. "Your soul for his freedom." I hesitated. The shadows shifted, revealing glimpses of other lost souls, children who had danced with Mr. Whispers, their laughter swallowed by eternity. I thought of Jacob, his eyes filled with both fear and wonder. Could I sacrifice myself to save him? Sarah found me by the tree, her eyes wide as she glimpsed the shadow man. "What is this?" she whispered. I told her everything, the pact, the curse, the choice. She wept for Jacob, for the innocence stolen from him. "We can't let him suffer," she said. "But your soul?" I kissed her forehead. "I'll find a way," I promised. That night, as the moon hung low, I faced Mr. Whispers. "Take me," I said. "But release Jacob." His eyes softened, and he stepped back. "A noble choice," he murmured. "But remember, the shadows never forget." I felt the pull, the unraveling of my existence. As darkness claimed me, I saw Jacob smile, his laughter returning. Mr. Whispers faded, his form dissolving into the night. Now, I linger, a whisper in the wind, a guardian of secrets. Jacob plays, but he no longer dances alone. And Sarah, haunted by memories, tends to the old oak tree. The house stands silent, its walls echoing with our choices. And sometimes, when the moon is low, I hear Mr. Whispers, the unseen companion who taught me the true meaning of sacrifice. Story 16. The Unseen Guest. I always had a fascination with capturing moments, freezing time within the confines of a photograph. My family, ever so patient, indulged my hobby, posing for countless pictures over the years. But recently, something changed. Each photo began to reveal a presence, an uninvited anomaly. A blurry figure, always in the background, as if watching over us. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a smudge on the lens. But the figure persisted, growing clearer with every snap of the shutter. Our home, a quaint two-story house on the outskirts of town, had always been our sanctuary. But the photographs made me question our solitude. I decided to investigate, delving into the history of the house, only to discover tales of a previous owner who vanished without a trace. The locals whispered about a spirit, one that lingered in the realm of the living, captured only by the eye of a camera. The figure became the subject of my obsession. I took photos obsessively, trying to catch a glimpse of it without the veil of the camera. My family grew concerned as I distanced myself, spending hours reviewing the images, each one revealing the figure more distinctly. It was always there, yet never there, a paradox that haunted my waking thoughts. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I set up my camera on a tripod, determined to confront our silent observer. The air grew cold, and a shiver ran down my spine as I pressed the shutter button. The camera whirred, and the flash illuminated the room. There it was, the figure, standing right behind my family, its features still a blur, but its presence undeniable. Panic set in as I realized the figure was inching closer with each photo. My family, unaware of the looming threat, smiled for the camera, trusting me. But I could no longer protect them from the unseen. The figure's intentions were unknown, but its persistence suggested a sinister purpose. As I prepared to take another photo, the room grew deathly silent. The camera's flash seemed to freeze time itself, and in that moment of eerie stillness, I heard a whisper, a voice that didn't belong to any of us. "Look closer," it said, a command that chilled me to the bone. The figure haunted my dreams. Its indistinct features tormented my nights, and I woke up drenched in sweat, my mind replaying the whispered command, "Look closer." But how could I? The camera revealed more than my eyes ever could, yet it remained elusive, a phantom that defied logic. I scoured old photographs, desperate for clues. The figure appeared in family gatherings, birthdays, even mundane moments, a shadow lurking behind us, always obscured. My wife, Sarah, noticed my obsession and pleaded with me to stop. "It's just a trick of the light," she said, her voice trembling. But I knew better. This was no mere lens aberration. One evening, as dusk settled over our home, I set up the camera once more. The figure had grown bolder, its form sharpening. I adjusted the focus, my heart pounding. Sarah stood by the window, her silhouette framed against the fading light. I snapped the photo, and there it was, the figure, inches from her, its face twisted in anguish. "Who are you?" I whispered, my breath fogging the viewfinder. The figure didn't answer, but its eyes bore into mine, pleading. I zoomed in, desperate for clarity. The pixels revealed a face, a man, gaunt and hollow-eyed. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I pressed my ear to the camera, straining to listen. "Release me," he mouthed, his voice echoing in my mind. "Free me from this limbo." His gaze shifted to Sarah, and I understood. He was tethered to our family, bound by some ancient curse. But why? What had we done to deserve this spectral companion? I researched forgotten rituals, seeking a way to sever the connection. The figure grew impatient, appearing in every photo, closer now, as if merging with our reality. Sarah's health deteriorated. She complained of nightmares, of a man whispering in her ear. I couldn't protect her anymore. The figure wanted something from us, and time was running out. I confronted it one moonless night. Armed with the camera, I stood in the attic, the epicenter of its presence. The figure materialized, its face twisted in agony. "Why?" I demanded. "What do you want?" Its eyes held mine, and for the first time, I glimpsed its humanity. "I was betrayed," it said, its voice like rusted chains. "My family cursed me, trapped me between worlds. They took my life, and now I seek retribution." "But why us?" I asked, trembling. "Because your lens sees what others ignore," it replied. "You can set me free." I hesitated, torn between compassion and fear. The figure stepped closer, merging with my reflection in the camera's display. "Take my place," it whispered. "Capture my essence. Only then will the curse break." The figure's proposition hung in the air, a spectral thread connecting our fates. I hesitated, torn between my family's safety and the allure of unraveling this supernatural mystery. Sarah's eyes pleaded with me, her frail form swaying as if caught in an otherworldly current. "Capture my essence," the figure repeated, its voice echoing through the attic. "Only then will the curse break." I glanced at the camera, its lens gleaming like a portal. The figure's face contorted, anguish etched into every pixel. I had glimpsed its past, the betrayal, the curse, but what lay beyond that? Could I trust its words? Sarah stepped forward, her hand on my shoulder. "We can't keep living like this," she whispered. "Our daughter deserves better." I nodded, my resolve hardening. If the figure spoke the truth, perhaps this sacrifice was the only way to end its torment. I adjusted the camera settings, focusing on the figure's hollow eyes. The room seemed to hold its breath, shadows stretching toward us. "Ready?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The figure nodded, its form flickering. I pressed the shutter, and the flash consumed us. For a heartbeat, I glimpsed eternity, the man's pain, his longing. Then it was over. The camera whirred, and I lowered it, trembling. The attic remained silent. The figure had vanished, leaving behind only the echo of its plea. Sarah collapsed, her breathing shallow. I checked the photo. The figure now stood beside me, its features merging with mine. I felt its weight, its memories seeping into my mind. "Thank you," it whispered, and I understood. The curse had shifted, transferring to me. I was the new keeper of its secrets, the bridge between realms. But what had I truly captured? A malevolence or a desperate soul seeking release? Days blurred into weeks. The figure's presence lingered, its whispers urging me to look closer, to see what others couldn't. I studied the photo, zooming in on its eyes. There, hidden within the pixels, I glimpsed a door, a threshold to another world. The figure had given me a choice: remain the observer or step through. Sarah grew weaker, her skin translucent. She knew the truth, the sacrifice I'd made. Our daughter, Emily, sensed it too, her innocent eyes questioning. "Why do you take so many pictures, Daddy?" she asked. "What are you looking for?" I kissed her forehead, my heart heavy. "Answers," I replied. "A way to set things right." The attic became my sanctuary. I set up the camera, capturing moments, our family dinners, Emily's laughter, Sarah's fading smile. The figure watched, its presence both comforting and suffocating. I studied the photos, searching for clues, for a way to undo what I'd done. And then, one stormy night, as lightning split the sky, I saw it, the figure, clearer than ever. Its eyes bore into mine, pleading. "The door," it whispered. "Open it." I hesitated, my hand trembling. The camera's display revealed the door, a shimmering rift, reality bending around its edges. I could feel the figure's longing, its desperation. But what lay beyond? Salvation or damnation? I turned to Sarah, her breath shallow, her life slipping away. "Forgive me," I whispered, and stepped through. The attic vanished, replaced by a desolate landscape, a realm of fractured mirrors, each reflecting a different version of myself. The figure stood there, waiting. "Welcome," it said. "Now you see what I've seen, the fractured truth." And as the mirrors closed in, I understood. The figure wasn't a ghost, it was a guardian, protecting reality from shattering. But I had broken the cycle, and now the world trembled on the brink of collapse. The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.